The American taxpayer just became the best crypto trader ever with a cost basis of $0. President Trump signed an executive order to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which will contain Bitcoin entirely owned by the federal government, obtained from criminal or civil asset forfeiture proceedings. He's also hosting a roundtable discussion at the White House, and the topic was rumored to be the strategic crypto reserve for the United States. His guests aren't just random people with Twitter accounts pulling up to the Oval Office, by the way. The CEOs of Coinbase, Gemini, Ripple, MicroStrategy, and other key players in the industry are going to be there. Most people think this whole thing is just about the money, and I understand the optics aren't exactly great since the room is going to be worth a few $1 billion, give or take a couple $100 million depending on the price of Bitcoin. Oh, and the other thing, the president and the first lady have official meme coins whose charts look very similar to pump and dump crypto scams. So when I say this is really about the security and stability of America, I understand the criticism that brings. So let's refocus to what really matters. The fact that trillions of dollars were printed in the past few years, which somehow led to eggs being one of the best investments of our lifetime. But more seriously, we are now, for the first time in modern US history, at a point where kids are not going to be wealthier than their parents, despite in some cases being more educated. The middle class is shrinking. Young people aren't getting married, aren't having children, and can't afford to buy a home. More and more people are looking for a financial path forward, and that means crypto. Hi, I'm Raj V. On this channel, we talk about money, and in this video, we'll go over what a reserve asset is and what the US is currently holding. We'll then be able to see if this whole concept even makes sense when we apply it to Bitcoin and other cryptos for that matter, and then we'll go over what this all means for crypto holders with what we know so far. To put it simply, a reserve asset is something the government puts away just in case of an emergency. It's like the chocolate bar on the nightstand your wife doesn't know about. For example, the US has a national strategic grain reserve, which makes a lot of sense because people need to eat, and cereal is as American as the 4th of July. Bad news if you like raisins, though. In 1949 to 2015, there was a national raisin reserve. You heard that right. A national old dried up grape reserve was around for 66 years. I guess the Department of Government Efficiency doesn't have to worry about that one right now. There's also the Strategic National Stockpile, which holds emergency supplies of drugs and vaccines. This particular stockpile is focused on public health and has been used for major tragedies like 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, and of course COVID-19. Lesser known stockpiles include the Northeast Home Heating Oil Reserve, which is responsible for millions of barrels of diesel fuel kept in the Northeast of the United States, a helium stockpile that was recently sold to the private sector, the Defense Department stockpile of rare earth and lithium, and the National Defense Stockpile of various metals. The USDA also maintains a food vault containing seeds in Colorado, and on a global scale, you might have heard about the Svalbard Seed Vault that holds over 1 million different types of seeds built right into the side of a mountain. Don't ever send me there. Send me on a plane to Miami. And of course, the one we're all most familiar with, the US Strategic Oil Reserve. In 1973, OPEC, or the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, suddenly decided to stop sending out oil to any country that supported Israel during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. This sent the price of oil through the roof, and in response, the United States has kept millions of barrels of oil on hand ever since. On occasion, the US does release oil from these reserves. Most recently, former President Biden began releasing oil from the reserves to stabilize oil prices after Russia invaded Ukraine. And it sure helps when a pipeline bursts. The only winners of an oil spill is Big Soap. Dawn has the best commercials. Look at this tiny baby duck getting cleaned up. I'm completely defenseless. We have to buy this soap, and only this soap. And funny enough, I did actually go check to see what was in our kitchen right now, and it was Dawn soap because ads work. Food and energy make a lot of sense to hold in reserves just in case of emergency. We all know that squirrels gather seeds in spring and save them for winter. But how does reserve assets work with something like money? You can't eat Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't actually solve that. The US has a few monetary assets in reserve, gold and foreign currencies being the simplest ones to mention, and the government holding them allows for economic stability and helps with trade. This also serves as a backup if the national currency rapidly becomes devalued. And if foreign oil suppliers can stop supply on a dime and the whole world can shut down for months on end, anything is possible, and we should be prepared as much as we can be, at least, in both real tangible goods and monetarily. So we might not be able to burn it for fuel, eat it, or use it for our health, but very simply, for the sake of diversification alone, Bitcoin and other cryptos, a multi-trillion-dollar asset class, could reasonably be considered for a US strategic reserve, even if it's in very small quantities. And apparently, no complete audit has ever occurred for the government's Bitcoin holdings, which is reportedly about 200,000 Bitcoin, roughly $18 billion worth at the time of this recording. Ironically, because of the blockchain, Bitcoin does actually solve this. And of course, altcoins were not left out of the fun. The executive order establishes a US digital asset stockpile consisting of digital assets other than Bitcoin forfeited in criminal or civil proceedings. Looking further into this, according to Arkham Intelligence, the US government, in addition to Bitcoin, currently holds 122 million of the stablecoin Tether, 56,000 Ethereum, 750 wrapped Bitcoin, 40,000 BNB, and a number of altcoins in significantly smaller US dollar amounts. This was at the time of researching this video. This doesn't include the 195,000 Bitcoin already sold for $366 million, which would be worth billions today. Notably, there is no XRP, Solana, or Cardano in the existing holdings, according to Arkham, which just means they were never seized by the government. David Sachs also wrote, "The government will not acquire additional assets for the stockpile beyond those obtained through forfeiture proceedings," which means for now, if it wasn't seized and not sold already, it's not in the stockpile. So there's some mixed takeaways here. Let's break it down into two categories: Bitcoin and altcoins. For Bitcoin, I'm marking this down as a huge win. It's like when your girlfriend of 5 years asks you point blank, "What are we?" and you ask her to marry you on the spot. 0 to 100 real fast. The largest economy in the world formally owns Bitcoin, and with that comes the biggest sign of approval possible on a global scale. That's pretty straightforward. Personally, I still think the markets will be extremely volatile and the space needs more time to mature. But in a world constantly craving certainty, and with investors seemingly being more rewarded to lean into uncertainty, this brings us to altcoins. If you thought altcoins were riding on a crypto stockpile, maybe that was true for short-term price action. But it's been very clear to me, in my opinion, for a long time that for any altcoin to succeed, ultimately it's going to have to follow in Bitcoin's footsteps and actually become adopted. If it has value and continues to provide some real-world utility, it will continue to gain market share, and there's only a handful of projects actually doing that right now. Most of them, for the moment, have been left out of the stockpile. And ultimately, that doesn't faze me at all. After all, Apple, Tesla, Nvidia stock, none of those are on any government reserve asset lists, and they've done pretty well so far. And who knows, laws are just words on pieces of paper, and it's entirely possible our favorite altcoin joins the crypto reserve eventually. But focusing on the grand scheme of things, the current administration has continued to pave the way forward for crypto and investors to have a more even playing field. Lawsuits against crypto companies have been and will likely continue to be dropped, and President Trump is set to meet with the biggest figures in the industry. Personally, I have no clue what they'll be discussing anymore because the establishment of the crypto reserve has already happened. I guess they'll be talking about everything else, which in my opinion, not financial advice, is still long-term bullish. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video, and thanks for watching.